Nothing was there when the helicopter touched down. Only a handheld radio, logged earlier that morning, remained in the record. Its transmission pointed to open ground on the west slope of a drainage basin, 17 miles southeast of McKinley Park. The coordinates were precise. They were confirmed twice. When crews arrived, the tundra showed no disturbance, no footprints, no equipment, no clothing, no compression in the moss. The weather allowed visibility. The search radius expanded. The ground stayed unchanged. The radio call described a person in distress at that location. The location showed no sign that anyone had ever stood there. The file records the coordinates as valid. The site remains empty. The coordinates were transmitted from a location 17 miles southeast of the McKinley Park boundary in a drainage basin accessed only by seasonal air approach or overland traverse from the park's highway service corridor. The basin sits at an elevation near 4,000 feet, enclosed by lateral ridges that extend northwest from the Tekla-Nika drainage divide. Spruce and willow occupied the lower elevations. Above that, exposed bedrock and tundra scrub. Winter access is impractical. Aircraft landings depend on visibility and surface condition. Ground transit requires prior coordination and weather clearance. The area experiences extended winter darkness and snowpack accumulation, exceeding 6 feet in sheltered zones. Summer daylight permits operations from late May through early September, though cloud ceiling and precipitation remain variable. Maps issued in 1964 classify the zone as undeveloped backcountry. No permanent structures were recorded. Seasonal use by survey crews and geological teams occurred intermittently during the late 50s and early 60s. But administrative oversight was minimal. The drainage was noted in earlier territorial surveys for its tendency to retain fog and low cloud during temperature inversions. Flight planning documents advised caution during marginal conditions. Records recovered from the Alaska State Troopers Coordination Office in Fairbanks contain transcripts of radio communication received on August 14, 1978. The transmission was logged at 9:47 hours. This is November 72 Kilo. We have an individual in distress approximately 17 miles southeast of park boundary, McKinley District. Coordinates follow: 63 degrees, 31 minutes north, 149 degrees, 52 minutes west. Subject reports injury and requests extraction. Visibility is poor. Cloud deck below ridgeline. Stand by for confirmation. A second transmission followed at 10:03 hours. Coordinates confirmed. Subject is on open ground near the west slope of the drainage. No structures visible. Smoke signal deployed but not observed due to sealing. Request priority dispatch. The transmission quality was clear. No interference was noted in the log. A helicopter was dispatched from the Healy staging area at 10:52 hours. Flight time was estimated at 34 minutes under existing weather. The crew reached the coordinates at 11:31 hours. The pilot's operational report, filed the same evening, contains the following observations. Arrived at designated coordinates 11:31 hours. Weather, overcast, ceiling approximately 800 feet AGL, light precipitation. Visibility 3 miles. Surface: open tundra, no tree cover at this elevation. Ground conditions: dry, no recent disturbance observed. Conducted grid search within a half-mile radius of transmitted position. No smoke, no signals. No individual observed. Landed at 11:47 hours to conduct ground inspection. Surface soil was undisturbed, no footprints, no equipment, no clothing, no debris. Vegetation showed no compression or trampling. Area photographed for record. Departed site 12:14 hours after confirming no presence. Returned to staging area without contact. The photographs were attached to the report. They show flat ground covered in low scrub and moss. The soil appears dry. No impressions are visible. A follow-up search was initiated the following morning under improved visibility. 2 additional aircraft participated. Ground teams were inserted at intervals along the drainage's western slope to establish visual coverage. The search perimeter was extended to a 2-mile radius from the original coordinates. Teams swept overlapping zones and reported findings by radio at scheduled intervals. No evidence of human presence was recovered. No shelters, no equipment caches, no clothing, no personal effects. the soil remained consistent across the zone, undisturbed tundra with intact vegetation, and no signs of recent passage. One crew reported a minor anomaly near the upper drainage, a section of ground where moss appeared slightly compressed. The area was photographed and measured. Dimensions were approximately 18 inches in diameter. No pattern was evident. No associated marks were observed nearby. The anomaly was noted in the supplemental file, but not classified as conclusive evidence. On August 17th, a request was submitted to review the original radio transmission for clarity and possible technical error. The recording was examined by communications staff at the Fairbanks office. No distortion was detected. The voice was described as male, calm, and articulate. Coordinates were spoken clearly and confirmed in the second transmission. No identification was provided beyond the aircraft call sign. A record search was conducted to trace the origin of the call sign, November 72, Kilo. No registration matched that designator in the Alaska or federal aviation databases for 1978. No flight plan had been filed under that identifier in the preceding 6 months. The designator format was consistent with standard civilian aircraft registration, but no corresponding record existed. Additional coordination efforts were made through August 20th. No missing person reports were filed in the McKinley district during that period. No overdue hikers. No unreported aircraft. No outstanding search requests from adjacent jurisdictions. Inquiries were sent to ranger stations, airstrips, and seasonal outfitters operating in the region. None reported contact with an individual matching the transmission or the coordinates. The case file was transferred to inactive status on August 23, 1978. The photographs, transcripts, and operational reports were archived under reference code AST-78-0814-MCK. No further communication was received from the original source. Terrain assessments conducted in subsequent years confirmed the basin's isolation and infrequent use. Survey crews working in the area during the early 80s noted the absence of trails or established campsites. Wildlife activity was typical for the elevation and season. No unusual ground features were documented. The zone remains accessible only by air or extended overland approach. Seasonal conditions have not changed. Vegetation has remained stable. The coordinates transmitted in August 1978 correspond to open ground on the west slope of the drainage as described in the original report. The soil remains undisturbed. The review conducted in August 1978 raised procedural questions that were documented separately from the active search file. A memorandum dated August 19th notes that the aircraft call sign used in the transmission did not conform to expected patterns for emergency relay. Civilian aircraft in distress typically identify by their own registration. Third-party relay would include acknowledgement of the intermediary role. The transmission contained neither. The coordinates were delivered with precision uncommon in field distress calls. Degree and minute values were articulated without hesitation or correction. No request for confirmation was made by the reporting party. No fallback position was offered. Communication protocols in use during that period required aircraft relaying emergency information to provide their own position, heading, and operational status. None of these elements appeared in either transmission. The absence was flagged in the supplemental review, but attributed to stress or non-standard procedure. Weather data archived from the Healy Observation Station shows conditions on August 14th, consistent with the pilot's report. Cloud ceiling varied between 700 and 900 feet above ground level throughout the morning. Light rain persisted until approximately 1300 hours. Surface winds were calm. Visibility within the drainage basin would have been reduced by the ceiling and moisture. Smoke signals, if deployed, would likely dissipate quickly in damp air and limited vertical clearance. The conditions align with the statement that smoke was not observed from the air. Ground-level visibility, however, would have remained adequate for movement and orientation. Terrain features within several hundred yards would have been distinguishable. An individual on open ground would have been visible to an approaching aircraft below the cloud deck. No such individual was sighted during the initial or subsequent passes. Photographs taken during the ground. Inspection on August 14th were cross-referenced with images captured during the expanded search on August 15th. Both sets show consistent ground cover. Moss and low shrub appear intact. Soil texture is uniform. No linear disturbances are present. Botanical assessment of tundra recovery rates suggests that foot traffic across such terrain produces visible compression for a minimum of several days, often longer depending on moisture and vegetation density. The basin had received light precipitation on August 13th. Ground conditions on the 14th would have been conducive to impression retention. No such impressions were documented. One explanation considered during the review involved the possibility of location error. Coordinates transmitted verbally may be subject to transcription mistakes or mishearing, particularly under operational pressure. A recalculation was performed using incremental degree and minute variations. Alternate positions within a 5-mile radius were examined. During the expanded search, none contained evidence of presence. Human factors were also evaluated. Search operations in remote terrain depend on accurate observation under variable conditions. Cloud cover, elevation perspective, and terrain uniformity can obscure details or create false negatives. Helicopter crews operating at low altitude may miss ground features obscured by vegetation or shadow. Visual sweeps conducted at speed reduce the detection window for small objects or subtle disturbances. Ground teams inserted the following day had improved conditions and extended observation time. Their findings supported the initial assessment. The possibility of premature departure by the subject prior to arrival was examined. An individual capable of transmitting coordinates and deploying a smoke signal would retain sufficient mobility to move from the site. However, departure would produce tracks, vegetation compression, directional patterns in disturbed ground. No such patterns were found within the search perimeter. Time delay between transmission and arrival was 24 minutes from the second radio call to touchdown. Sufficient duration for repositioning, but insufficient to account for the absence of all physical trace. Movement across tundra at that elevation requires effort. Injured individuals proceed slowly. Healthy individuals leave clear paths when moving quickly. Neither condition was evident. The soil remained undisturbed, not only at the coordinate point, but across the 2-mile radius searched the following day. Another scenario involved equipment failure or misidentification on the part of the transmitting party. GPS technology was not in civilian use in 1978. Coordinates would have been derived from map reference, celestial navigation, or visual landmark triangulation. Errors in any of these methods are possible. The clarity and confidence of the transmission, however, suggest familiarity with the location. The C phrasing, subject is on open ground near the west slope of the drainage, implies direct observation or prior knowledge of terrain features. If the coordinates were incorrect, the transmitting party either believed them to be accurate or provided them deliberately. Neither explanation resolves the absence of corresponding evidence. Environmental masking was considered. Heavy rain can erase surface tracks within hours. Wind can redistribute loose soil. Animal activity can obscure or mimic human disturbance. Weather records do not support heavy rain in the hours preceding the search. Wind speed was minimal. Animal tracks noted during the ground inspection were consistent with seasonal wildlife patterns and did not overlap with the coordinate zone. The compressed moss observed near the upper drainage was photographed in detail. Measurements indicated a circular depression without radial displacement or secondary marks. No adjacent disturbance was present. Compression of that type can occur naturally through frost heave, subsurface drainage, or localized vegetation die-off. None of these processes produce isolated, uniform depressions in active tundra. The feature was logged. No additional investigation was authorized. Documentation review in subsequent years noted one unresolved element. The call sign, November 7. 2 Kilo was formatted correctly for civilian aircraft registration, but matched no active or retired designator in federal or state records. Aircraft deregistered prior to 1978 were reviewed. No match was identified. The possibility of a fraudulent or misremembered call sign was discussed in administrative notes dated October 1978. The recording was replayed multiple times. The audio remained clear. The call sign was articulated without ambiguity. If the transmission originated from an aircraft, that aircraft was not registered in any accessible database. If the transmission did not originate from an aircraft, the source used terminology and formatting consistent with aviation protocol. No civilian radio enthusiast activity was reported in the McKinley area during that period. No military exercises were scheduled. No agency drills were conducted. The source of the transmission was not identified. The case file was closed in August 1978. No individual was located. No remains were recovered. No equipment was found. Photographs and transcripts were retained in the Trooper Coordination Archive under standard procedure. Inquiries submitted in later years, primarily from researchers reviewing cold case records, have produced no additional evidence. The coordinates continue to correspond to open ground on the west slope of the drainage basin. Seasonal access remains limited. The terrain has not changed. The transmission was logged, the search was conducted, the file was archived, but the archive remains open. If you're drawn to these cold spaces, consider following along.